got our very first look, very first image from the latest Game of Thrones property called A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. This is coming sometime likely in 2025 onto HBO. This is a show that's going to be based on a series of three novellas or short stories from George R. R. Martin. This one, if you're not aware, this one takes place in the time frame in between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. So
Oh,
we're kind of
okay.
like, instead of 200 years before Game of Thrones, we're going to be like 90 to 100 years before Game of Thrones. And we got our first glimpse of the two actors that will be the leads in that. Dunk is a very tall, powerful knight. Egg is his young person he is protecting. I won't say anything more about who that person is, but this just goes more to our theory of for however long House of the Dragon goes, we're going to get one of these two shows every year. It just seems like in perpetuity. And then when one of them ends, we're going to get the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It just seems like that's where we're headed.
It's interesting because it definitely seems like HBO is saying, let's bet on Game of Thrones. Let's bet big on Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
which is smart. I think it's weird because the ending of Game of Thrones itself was so like universally panned. There was so much
Yeah.
negative sentiment, and I've seen a lot of people saying like things like how memory hold that show is. Like you can't almost think of an instance of a show that had that massive of a cultural impact or taking over the cultural conversation and then just kind of like disappeared.
Yeah.
Like no
Yeah.
one wants to talk about it until House of the Dragon, and then made people sort of do. But I don't know. It's just very strange. I don't. Are people sufficiently into this new stuff? And I'm not sure. I saw a couple other things this week. Um, to mention on them betting on it, right? As I sent you that link with the image, that they put a big fake dragon on the Empire State Building before the
Yep.
premiere. So that was amusing. But then after the season premiere, they're trying to say it was the highest numbers for anything on Max, but that's a fudge because when House of Dragon season one came out, it was still HBO Max, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the season one premiere actually did better than the season two premiere.
Yeah, that's a good way to segue here because I think the numbers overall were it was something like 10.6 or 10.7 million people watched the first episode, the premiere of House of the Dragon last year. Over the first, I think, 48 hours, it was 7.5 or 7.6 million. Now, some will be numbers will be added to that, in the days leading up to episode two here. But yeah, it didn't. Yeah, it didn't grab 100% of the people that tuned in to start the first season, certainly.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this maybe in a minute, or talk about this is in some of the things I've been writing, but there are some things in the first season that turn some people off. And yeah, I mean it's still incredibly popular and it's all over, just sort of as you said, a cultural conversation. But I think it's sort of like, will they ever get be able to achieve that high again from season three, four, five, six of Game of Thrones? Maybe not, but they're
I
going to
don't
try
know. Yeah,
where they can get there.
it'll be a question because it could just kind of dwindle in its viewership and still be worth doing. But maybe the season one premiere was the high point of people saying, like, oh, I remember when I was really into Game of Thrones. I'll check this show out. And then I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not trying to get down on it. And I hate to kind of engage too much in the ratings talk. But
Yeah.
they're clearly betting so big on the Game of Thrones averse with Night of the Seven Kingdoms and the other show we've talked more than one, right? There's a 10,000 ship show, I think the
Yeah.
animated shows, and
There certainly is animation.
um,
There's another one that's been revived, I think, based on the numbers that have come from House of the Dragon about the 10,000 ships, this
yeah,
thousands of years before Game of Thrones. So yeah, as you said, that they are pushing all in on Game of Thrones, and I just think we'll be seeing that content for a long time until they just see it's not, either in terms of audience numbers or financially worth it anymore.
yeah. I mean, I guess they've got the hardcore kind of George R. R. Martin fans, so that that gives a floor to the bet in a certain way.
Yeah.
Of course, they disappointed them, I think, with the season two premiere, and they disappointed more of them. They disappointed me because it was like people were talking about this big moment. I didn't even realize that was the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like before it is, people were like, "Oh, you're going to have this blood and cheese moment," you know. And I didn't even realize that was that until I was reading about it later and the differences between what they did in the show and what they did in the book. Um, I think that was pretty disappointing. Hopefully, it gets better, but that was my read on the first episode, which I did watch, but I
Yeah.
didn't think was very good. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I wasn't that into it.
So our recap is up on the site right now about episode one. Episode two will also be out Sunday night. So yeah, there is, without any spoilers, there is this massively important and gruesome story that takes place that was depicted on screen Sunday night. And many of those that were familiar with that story were the conversations, they're extremely let down by how they depicted it, by how they changed aspects of the story, how certain characters reacted within it. And so it was, yeah, certainly something that and I've been thinking a lot about this since writing the piece and since watching it and hearing some of this conversation. The people that knew this, that knew the nature of it, are disappointed. Of the, let's say, 8 or 9 million people have watched this episode now, how many of those do you think are book readers or text absorbers? I mean, I don't know. They have to sort of have this fine balance of appealing to both sides, right? And they've got a story to tell that needs to adapt to a majority of people that have not read this. And so, what character choices they're going to make with some of the people that were impacted by these changes, I'm withholding judgment, I guess. I was
Yeah.
disappointed. I was very disappointed, but I
I mean,
withhold
I guess
on
that's
how the
true, but
story goes.
yeah, I guess that's true because you could also ask, well, how many people are like me, Cameron Crane, right? Who part of how I got onto this is I'm like, I see Roxana Haddadi's article, and she does good work in general culture, yeah. And the headline is something like, "Why that scene in Game of Thrones should have been more disturbing." You know, so I read it. You know, it was like, "Here's what happened in the book." I'm like, "Oh wow, that would have been something." You know,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I mean, any number of people may have watched it and just kind of be blissfully unaware of the differences, and maybe, or I mean, look, it's not like what happened in the show is not disturbing.
No, it's disturbing.
It's disturbing. What happened in the book apparently was like they dialed it back apparently, and I don't know. Personally, I found that a little disappointing to know, but we'll see how it goes. I mean,
Yeah, we'll
I did
continue to
enjoy the
have.
new opening title sequence. I thought that was
Oh,
very
very,
cool.
very much so. That was as much as you can complain or have problems with an opening title sequence, I guess, for a show like this. I thought that the change to what they did by sort of weaving this tapestry of the story was, I mean, inspired and brilliant, frankly. I think it was really, really well done.
Yeah, but don't change the music.
No, 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 no. Not at all. So we'll continue to have weekly recaps. I'm doing that each week. I'll go ahead and put my claim in on Night of Seven Kingdoms as well now before
Okay.
he comes out. But
Yeah.
we'll be with you for the next
Yeah.
7 weeks
We're on Game of
on that.
Thrones. The Game of Thrones beat. That's cool.